Hello and welcome to Probability and Statistics 300 here at American River College. I'm Benjamin Etkin. In the next hour, we're going to talk about the course, how to be successful, what to expect, and how it compares with taking this course elsewhere. So let's start with that. I was a student and taught at both CSUS in Sacramento and UC Davis. The largest difference, of course, is the class size, and that is true even online. So I am accessible. You can send me an email, you can post the forums. There's lots of ways of getting help in this course. Of course, the course itself is created by me. The workbook is as well. The text is excellent. It's also open source from a community college professor in Flagstaff, Arizona. It's designed for students. Small classes mean that I'll know who you are through your work over the course of this semester, and the extent that you wish to email me and share your comments about the course, I'll know your personality as well. You'll certainly get to know me through the workbook. There's online lessons for every page of the workbook. Everything you're going to see on an exam comes out of that as well in the text. So class size is important, access is important. We give our students bus passes so you can get to school, and that's true if you choose to go to a Los Rios college. That was essential for me when I was a student, and it's still important now. So taking classes in the classroom will get you a transit pass. LRC at American River College stands for the Learning Resource Center. It's a huge building with a bunch of stuff. Many of our resources are online, the forums, and lots of help available in the text as well. But I want to point out that if you're headed to a Los Rios school, check out our Learning Resource Centers. They're excellent for language classes, for English classes, all sorts of good stuff. Now, a little bit about me. So I actually started as a student at American River College. So I took statistics at, or at least the first of the statistics courses that I took here at American River College. My bachelor's is from CSU Sacramento. My master's is from UC Davis. I graduated summa cum laude from both. My area is combinatorics. So combinatorics is related to graph theory. It's basically counting the number of ways that things can happen. So basically scheduling airlines or transit services, designing computers are all essentially questions of combinatorics. As a faculty member, I've served on the faculty senate, evaluation committees for colleagues. I was on the founding member of our equity committee. I've been on hiring committees. And then what I'm very proud of is my work coding, that is creating the code that makes homework in my open math. And we'll talk about that when we get to Canvas. I've written open source texts and, of course, the workbook for our course and the curriculum for many of our courses here at American River College. So you might ask, what is this SATI that looks like it belongs in the 1970s? And this is, in fact, a Cray supercomputer. And you can tell it's a supercomputer because it's big, but you can also tell that it is a little bit dated. This one is interesting in that they've put plastic paneling so you can see inside of it, and you might see all this blue, that kind of blue haze inside of this computer is blue wire. So every component of this computer is connected to every other component of this computer with the exact same amount of wire. And that's why there's so much wire wound up inside of it, because even if two devices are adjacent to each other in the computer is connected to everything else by the same length of wire. And the idea there is that this computer does not need a clock. The computer you're running now uses a clock. That means that every operation has to wait for every other operation to catch up so that answers don't appear before the questions that ask them and strange things like that. So if you don't have a clock, you need to ensure that everything happens when it should. And since the length of wire determines how long that electricity that impulse takes to get from one part of the computer to the other. You don't need a clock, you get a supercomputer. Now that is a elegant solution to designing computers, but it's not the only one. You think about things like the Berlin airlift and other questions in combinatorics, you can imagine that there are many ways of solving a question like this. And that's my area of mathematics, is looking at optimizing or designing computers to do specific tasks. Computers are a nice, generic, arm's length way of thinking about things that actually matter, like power distribution, transit networks, airline networks,
so the ethical
flow
conduct
of food,
basically
water.
says don't cheat, and what cheating is.
That's what I'm passionate about.
The work
So
of
the next thing we're
another
going to do is
as
take a
your
look at the
own.
syllabus.
That's cheating,
I'm going to point
as
out
is
some things
allowing
right
someone else
from
to
the
submit
beginning.
your work.
So first off, there are
So the
no
penalties for
exams
cheating
usually.
usually getting dropped from the course, receiving
I
an
do
F, and being
need
dismissed
you
from
to
school.
get into Canvas so that you can show
when
that you've
asked,
done the attendance.
you will
in
be
my
able
open
to
math.
explain your reasoning in your
The
own words
way that
and
I've
solve
coded these questions, I
similar
hope it's very
problems
clear
if
what I'm
there's any
looking for.
question
The text
about
is very
cheating.
clear.
The
And that's
learning
designed
materials
to teach
for
you
this
the skills.
semester
What
are
is
the
it that a
textbook
statistician
Statistics
does?
Using
We're going to have
Technology.
two
That's the second
documentaries this
edition, not
semester,
the
one right at
third.
the beginning,
The
first
links in
week.
here
That's an
and the
introduction
text
to
that
what
you'll be receiving from your
probability
school are
is,
the
its
correct
history,
ones.
and what
The
it's trying to
workbook
achieve
is where we'll be
nowadays
spending
with
a
more
lot of our
advanced
times
techniques,
because this
including
class
Bayesian
uses a
statistics.
mastery model.
So
We
that's meant to teach
start
you the
with
breadth
the
and the
workbook.
values.
A
We're gonna
computer,
end the
I
semester
have a
with
Linux,
a
but Macs and
documentary
PCs are
as
fine.
well, that will be
And
a summary
I
of
really
all the
believe
things
that
go
it takes,
into determining
makes it much
how
easier to
you
learn by using a
about
paper and
information.
pencil, and then of course
And
our
on
calculator.
Thursdays,
So
we'll
TI
do
84 is
challenges. Those are
preferable, but 83 pluses are okay. They will work. Not 83s, but 83 pluses. This is the Linux Penguin Tux, and our first quote is, and something to be thinking about over the course of the semester: how is it possible that mathematics, a product of human thought that is independent of experience, fits so excellently the objects of reality? Albert Einstein, of course, was a physicist, but he was talking about how math precedes science and society in terms of what it is able to explain and how we understand the world. So let's scroll up again and look at the text. So there's a cover of the text. Notice it's the second edition. So it's by Kate Kozik. She's a community college professor in Flagstaff, Arizona. Here's the ISBN. There's also a PDF of this text in the course information folder if you have a way to read and take notes on texts electronically. The workbook is how we will start each section. Each chapter has a video that accompanies the workbook. As you watch the video, you can work through the workbook, and that's by me. Here's our calculator. TI-84 will work, a TI-83 plus will work, but a TI-83 without the plus will not work. So the three documentaries for this semester, the one we're going to start the semester with through the first week, is NOVA, Prediction by the Numbers. And then we'll end this semester as a kind of summary by looking at climate change by numbers. Both of those are links to the library's website. Okay, let's look at the next page, or that last quote on the first page. The book of nature is written in the language of mathematics, a very elegant way of saying what mathematics is and why we care about it, by Galileo Galilei, probably best described as a physicist as well. So you may use your calculator and the GeoGebra applications that are inside of MyOpenMath for all homework exams, midterms, and finals. I know that's not true for some of my colleagues, so I want to make sure that you know that I'm expecting you to have those handy when you need them. Studying and attendance is essential to this course. So attendance might be called homework in another course. It is very important. So read the section in the text. So our text is written for students, and that's why I've chosen it. It's also very inexpensive. Note the new ideas in each section. Make sure that you can explain any new ideas in your own words. Write down the questions and steps of the solution in your notes. Make clarifying notes as you work. Making clarifying notes is probably one of the most important parts. It's called glossing. It's basically adding your own notes to a text. Next, complete your attendance assignment online. Do all the assigned problems in order. Notice how the same idea can be applied to different problems. If you have a question, refer to your notes and then the text. If the text cannot answer your question, post it to the forums. Read that section of the book. Look for new words. And formally, you should reserve at least 1 hour of studying each day for at least 9 hours each week. So that's a rough average. There's going to be weeks with midterms that will certainly take more than that. At the beginning of the semester, it'll be a little bit easier. The load is lighter. Less is new, and we're not building on ideas quite so much. But certainly by the end of the semester, I'd expect that the average to be close to 9 hours. When the final comes up, a little bit more there. Completing each attendance assignment on time is a course requirement. Course requirements are things that if you do not do, you can be dropped for not doing them. So that's where that phrase course requirement comes from. And of course, they have to be completed on time as well. And we're calling them attendance assignments. You could think of that as homework, if that's a better way for you to think of it. But it really is meant to simulate class time, the discussions that we have in class as you work through the workbook. So chapter exams and midterm exams, studying for those by looking over your workbook and your notes, rework difficult problems, and of course, if you miss something, you'll be given no points for that. Critically examine what you learn. That's essential in statistics because there's different ways of answering the same question. By the end of the semester, we're going to have several projects on Bayesian statistics, which is very different from classical statistics, and I think you'll see that throughout the semester. Online attendance serves as attendance and is, again, a course requirement. That means that if you don't do it, you can be dropped. In particular, if you miss 2 chapter attendance assignments, that's equivalent to 2 weeks of the semester, you'll be dropped from the course. Grades are assigned fairly inconsistently with exactly what you'd expect. An A is anything in the 90s and so on. I've broken up the weight of this course so that you get some points for each of the important parts of it. So the attendance assignments, 10%. The documentaries, 5%. Projects are where we apply what we've learned to new settings, 15%. The chapter exams, there's 11 of those, so 30%. The midterm exams, there's 2 of those, one for the first half of the semester, one for the second half of the semester. Those are 10% each for a total of 20%. And then 1 point in 5, 20% for the final exam, an important part of the course. Any online course, it's important to remember that you're still talking with people, and it's important to be respectful and to treat your fellow classmates as you would want to be treated. Avoid any disparaging terms or colorful terms. Be respectful of others. And since a lot of this course is based on having access to the forums, thank students for their answers in the forums. So these are our holidays here at American River College. So there's quite a few holidays in the spring semester, which is nice. There's also some dates that if your counselor or your teacher and you decide that this isn't for you, you should probably check those out too. If you're starting college soon, you might want to apply for a Cal Grant application. And then, of course, the last day that the final is open. And then the last day to drop with a W. This is probably less important for DE students like yourself than for students at AR proper, but it's important to see how the semester falls out. Also notice that our spring recess is perhaps different from your own. It's March 13th through 19th. I probably won't be available very much, or at least at exactly the times you'd expect during that week, and I have no assignments due that week. That said, all assignments are open for 2 weeks, so you can definitely get ahead during that time. And if your spring recess is later, then just use this one to get a little bit ahead. If your spring recess is earlier, get in touch with me. So 2 more quotes. One from the president of the American Mathematical Society. She says, "Despite an objectivity that has no parallel in the world of art, The motivation and standards of creative mathematics are more like those of art than of science, which is really remarkable to think how human math is. And then our last quote comes from the Reverend Martin Luther King Jr. The function of education is to teach one to think intensively and to think critically. And I couldn't agree more. Intelligence plus character, that is the goal of true education. This course is built around a conception of statistics that is called classical statistics. But there's other ways of thinking about statistics. We kind of lump them into a category called Bayesian statistics. And I think that's where character comes in. Past performance, changing your expectations based on what you see. Learning, in other words. Bayesian statistics helps us do things that we've never done before, that we cannot perform an experiment for. Basically, allowing us to guide ourselves into the unknown. Intelligence plus character, says Martin Luther King, is the goal of true education. So the next page has a list of all the things we're going to be doing this semester. Don't let this concern you too much. These are things that we have to put in a syllabus, and so here it is. You will be learning a lot this semester is the upshot. So a summary, something that I like, a photograph that I took on Coit Tower in San Francisco, a plant growing in a fairly hostile environment. The pursuit of excellence in the face of adversity is invariably matched by the glory of the result. Work pays off, in other words. Here's a map of where I am on campus when I'm on campus, Howard Hall, Office 131. Here are the bus stops, so that'll give you an idea where it is. My office looks out on the number 1 bus stop, the one from Light Rail. Across the street is the 82 stop when it's headed back towards CSUS and University 65th Light Rail. And then across the street on Orange Grove is the bus stop for the number 1 headed to Light Rail and downtown. DSPS is in student services. There's tutoring in the Learning Resource Center. There's MESA and the Math Multimedia Learning Center. That's less of an issue, but MESA is common throughout colleges, so whether you go to American River College or a different college within Los Rios or anywhere in the state, you'll find a MESA center. So that's important to know that that's out there. Just the kind of layout of a college campus and where things are. So the final exam is comprehensive. That means that it covers everything. So it is available for 2 weeks, and that's common for virtually all the assignments in this course, ending on Tuesday, May the 16th. There is a time limit, but it's open for 2 weeks. The Learning Resource Center has tutoring, and then of course any changes that make the course better, I'll get in touch with you via email. Okay, let's take a look at the next page of the syllabus. It is the calendar for the semester. So you can see that we have some holidays. In fact, the first day of the semester is a holiday. Then we've got President's Day, and then we've got spring recess, and then finals begin. So the way I've set this up is that our major assignments are due on Tuesday of each week. So you've got that whole remainder of the week, and then the weekend, if you have access at that point, Monday to answer any questions, get things together. Remember, everything's open for 2 weeks, so you don't have to wait for when an assignment appears in the syllabus, but that's when it's due. So, for example, Chapter 1 closes, the Chapter 1 exam and everything that precedes it closes on January 21st. Actually, 24th, sorry. So we've got our exams, midterms, a documentary, and then the final and pre-final all on Tuesdays. Notice that that also allows us to have as much time as possible to prepare for the final. I could have had it on Wednesday, but then that kind of makes it too close to our projects on Thursdays. So for the first week, we have a welcome project. When we go into Canvas, I'll show you that. And we've got a documentary due, and that is an assignment that is graded. That's part of the 5% for documentaries. After that, the projects begin. They're also in your workbook. There's also videos for those, just like the chapter workbook attendance and exams. So here are the topics, and you can see that the semester ends with several projects that discuss and try to bring out the value of Bayesian statistics. So the next page of the syllabus is new. It talks about the mastery model. What does it mean for the course to be taught in that way? So first off, all assignments are open for 2 weeks. So you can see when they close in the calendar on the previous page, but they're open for 2 weeks up to that time. So I really recommend that you try to get a little bit ahead, that you try in the first few weeks when the concepts are easiest and when we have less going on, that you get to the point where you're starting a chapter as soon as it opens. That's one of the nice things about the beginning of the semester being relatively easy, is you can get into that point where you're starting, you've got 2 weeks to get through those chapter exams and projects. So all assignments, except for the attendance assignments and projects, are timed. So in addition to having a due date, all of those assignments are also timed. Now remember, your attendance assignment is like your homework, so there's a lot of material there, and you can go back to it over the course of those 2 weeks. Projects are the same way. The idea is that you'll be thinking about those, so you can log in and take a look at them without the timer starting. In other words, you can start the project, start thinking about those, look at the questions in the workbook that match the projects very well, and get a head start on those. So first, there's the online lessons while taking notes in your workbook. So the online lessons match the workbook perfectly. So each chapter has an online lesson for that chapter, and so does each project. And as you work through the online lesson, as you see me working through the workbook, you can work through the workbook yourself. Make sure to pause it, make sure that you can understand it, you can rewind it, you can go back over things. Get your calculator out as you do that, and you'll be learning in the same way that we would in the classroom. You'll be taking your notes in the workbook. There's plenty of room for you to add other notes to yourself. The next thing is the workbook quiz. It's timed for 10 minutes. The idea here is that for each chapter, with your completed workbook, you'll complete the quiz. Now, this is when the mastery model kicks in. The idea is that to go on, you must earn 100% on the workbook quiz. Now, remember, the workbook that you see on the screen as I'm working through it and I bring up the calculator and we talk about what's going on is exactly the workbook that you've got in front of you as you're taking notes, and it's exactly the questions that I'm going to ask you on the workbook quiz. So the idea here is that your workbook is completed, that you've got the vocabulary down, that you remember the examples that we saw, and so on the quiz, you'll be able to quickly go to that particular example or that particular vocabulary or that particular question sometimes, find the answer to that question and type it in the time allowed. Now, if that doesn't work, and there's a lot of reasons that that may not work for a particular exam, for the first 2 workbook quizzes, I have a makeup for it. So this is a second copy of the workbook quiz. And that's basically because as you get used to this, the idea that you've got a time limit, the idea that you've got to have the workbook completed before you attempt the workbook quiz, and just misspelling a word, things like that, may cause you to need to use the makeup. Now the makeup itself is not tied to progressing, so you'll need to send me an email for the makeup quizzes, not the workbook quizzes themselves, just the makeup quizzes, for me to manually enter your score. Now, after those first 2, that the remainder of the workbook quizzes do not also have a makeup. If you find yourself in a situation that you do not pass the workbook quiz, then simply email your completed workbook chapter to me. So you can do that several different ways. You can scan it, You can photograph it. You can even make a video of it and post that to me. And then again, I'll have to manually open the next part of this. And the next part of this is the attendance assignment. So this is the thing closest to homework, the thing that I'm going to need to see you doing so that I know that you're participating in the course. So again, this is the mastery model. So you must earn 80% on the attendance assignment. So that should say attendance assignment there to progress. So if you do not pass the attendance assignment, you're okay. There you can then earn 90% on the optional practice. Email me and request that I reset the attendance assignment. Now you might say, well, why is one different from the other, and why is the way around it have a higher percentage requirement than the assignment itself? So the optional practice allows you to recreate a question 100 times. The attendance assignment only allows you to recreate an assignment 3 times. So there's a chance, a very low chance, this doesn't happen much, but it's kind of nice to know that you won't be stuck. There's a chance that you'd run out of those 3 attempts. Now, I don't recommend you put yourself in this situation, because then you have to earn 90% on the optional practice and then go back. Reset means that I simply delete the attempts from the attendance assignment, and you have to go back to it and earn 80% before going on. So it's best to know what you're doing, be able to give yourself the time. Notice there is no time limit for the attendance assignment. You can go in and out at any time in those 2 weeks. Of course, you need to give yourself time to get through the chapter exam. It's timed. It has a 90-minute time limit. You can start at any time before it closes, but it will close at the due date even if you have time left. So at the end of that day, 11:55 p.m., it'll close whether you've got 1 minute left or 89 minutes left. So make sure that you've got the time and make sure that you're before the due date. So these are due each Tuesday, and they are, as you remember, a large portion of your score. The chapter exam and the midterms are all due on Tuesdays. You can do them before that. You do not have to wait. Remember that the midterms cover half the semester, so there's 2 of them, one covering the first half, one covering the second half. And the word comprehensive simply means that that final covers everything. The projects are due each Thursday, and the projects are also in the workbook. So there is an online lesson for the workbook projects, just like for the chapters. And those are available all semester. The speeding project is the only one that isn't in the main set of projects. It begins on page 193. Something unusual about this semester, in the past I've required my students to use a free program called R, but getting high school students access to a computer, getting them logged in, there's issues there. So we're no longer using R, and similarly we're no longer installing applications on our calculator, which is kind of cool, but we're not doing it. Instead, I have created some calculators for you. So they're created by GeoGebra. They're in the class resources folder. And here they are. So let me show you what they look like. There's 2 that are distribution calculators, normal and Gossett Student T distribution calculators. And notice that you can do inverse. So see how this box is checked to actually find the boundaries. So here's the boundary at 413. This is an example of how it looks to use that. So you've got a visual to accompany the algebra. There's also a goodness of fit calculator that we'll use for the test statistics and probability in chapter 11, our last chapter. We'll use the normal and Gossett Student T distribution beginning in chapter 6, and that takes the place of tables. It takes the place of all sorts of different commands in our calculator. It gives us a picture as we're doing it. That picture is, notice, in standard deviations from the mean, so it regenerates as needed. We can just click boxes and enter values to get exactly what we need. Same thing for the goodness of fit calculator. If you're wondering, this is Frances. You might hear her barking in the back of my lessons as we talk through the workbook, or if you get in touch with me. So there she is. She's the one who keeps me going, especially when I'm working from home. So the next thing we're going to do is look at Canvas and MyOpenMath. In particular, let's focus on the assignments due the first week, the NOVA documentary called Prediction by the Numbers, and our first challenge. Okay, welcome to our Canvas page, and in particular the modules. This is where you should land when you go into Canvas. Notice that I'm on the student side. This should look exactly like what you see. The first tab is Getting Started. It's open. Later in the semester you may want to close it, but for now it's got the hello and welcome information that I sent out in the email, so just the same steps. There's the syllabus, the link to the welcome video that you're watching now, the project video, a much shorter video on how to use the project videos, the online lessons, and where to find those in the workbook. How to log into MyOpenMath through Canvas. That's where you are now, so you're doing great. And then how to watch the documentary. Here's a link again. I'll show you the link inside the course flow. And then, of course, configure your college email. That is essential. If you're here because of an email, then you're exactly right. You do need to check your email regularly. In fact, the only thing different between this and the email that I sent you is that that email has the password that you'll need to get into each of those. And then here's how to configure your email and what to do to make that work. So let's minimize this. Let's go back out of that and let's minimize that. Let's go into the course resources now. So there's a fair amount in here that is useful all semester, but this is not the course itself. So an introduction to myself, a little bit of a discussion about what it is to be a mathematician, about what it is to teach mathematics, then some of the papers that I've written. Actually, I don't think I have the list to papers. These are guest editorials. So the next one is another link to the syllabus, and the course information is basically who created all this. So Catherine Kozik created the text, and there's a link to it if you want to download it. I created the workbook. The homework sets were developed in Tacoma, Washington by David Strayer and myself. I created the videos, and the text is licensed under a Creative Commons Share and Share Alike license. So let's go back to, I could just go next, but I'm enjoying doing this. Here's a link again to the syllabus and a link to the welcome videos. So that is again the one you're watching now and the projects. The next thing is a normal distribution calculator. I mentioned this when we talked about the syllabus. So this one's live. So let's say I wanted to find the probability and I wanted it to be inside. So I wanted the lower bound. Well, let's change this. Let's say the mean is 25. Let's say that the standard deviation is 3. And let's say that we want it between 22. That's one standard deviation below the mean. So the mu means mean minus sigma. Sigma is our standard deviation, so you can see those there. So this is one standard deviation below the mean, 2. Let's go maybe 2 standard deviations above the mean, 31. And it says that that area is 81.859 and change, approximately 82%. So this is a very nice way of not only seeing the area that you're interested in computing and the probability as a result, but really being able to do everything you want here. So there's left tail, there's right tail, there's outside and inside. You can find probability, but if you know the probability, you say that the probability is, let's say 80, we already did that, let's say 70%, and we want it to be a right-tailed probability, and of course we can change the standard deviation and the mean, and it says that that boundary is at 23.42 if we round it to 2 significant digits. So right there, and it's showing us what that looks like. The next one is a Gossett student t-distribution calculator, which is a whole lot more work behind the scenes, but it looks almost identical. The only difference here is the degrees of freedom, which is generally n minus 1, but I've given you the option to enter that because there's other times when the degree of freedom is calculated in a different way. So the only new thing here is the degree of freedom, and of course the way it's calculated on the inside. And then we've got a goodness of fit calculator. Remember, you can use these during exams. You can use these while you're doing your homework. This takes the place of some fairly sophisticated stuff that our calculator does, but doesn't show us a picture and is hard to do. So let's see what else is in that folder. So after that, there is one other thing, and that is the Let's Make a Deal game. So this is based on a game show on television in the 1970s and 80s. They didn't actually have exactly this game. It's a fascinating question, though. So let's do this a little bit. It's a nice introduction to probability because it is kind of odd what's going on. So let's say the game show host, who at that time was called Monty Hall, says, choose a door, and I say, I'm going to choose the third door. And then the game show host opens the first door and says, well, it's a great idea that you didn't choose the first door for this particular question because, the prize is not behind the first door. So now this is when the audience would get involved because the game show host would say, do you want to stay with your first choice or do you want to switch? I had chosen the third door. Maybe I should switch to the second door. So people would shout out, oh, maybe this one, maybe that one. Stay, switch, stay, switch. Okay, let's say I stay. Oh my goodness, in this case, I have won. So it's counting now the probability. So I stayed and won once. So let's play again. Okay, I'm going to do the third and I'm going to stay again. Oh goodness. I guess the third door doesn't always win. Notice it's in a different place. Each time I play this game, it's going to open one of the doors and show me that it was a great thing that I didn't choose that door and then give me the option of switching or staying. I'm going to stay again. Oh my goodness gracious. So let's keep playing. The first door, I'm going to stay again. My goodness, I've been doing pretty well here. I'm going to stay again. And what's interesting is that the first few examples here are perhaps implying something different than what you'd expect. So let's repeat this stay strategy that seems to have been working so well for me. Let's do it 100 times. So I'm going to have it work through this and let's see what's going on. So it looks like, oh my goodness, it's taking a nosedive. I was doing really well by staying, but now it looks like perhaps it isn't such a good strategy. So it looks like we've done it 25 times at this point. You can see the graph up here. Something interesting is going on as our strategy of staying all the time seems to be playing out. So now it looks like we're only winning like 36% of the time. Looks like it's going up a little, down a little, but certainly not where I started out. A lot more losses than wins with this stay strategy. So you might think, well, it doesn't really matter. There's two doors, what difference does it make if you stay or switch? But certainly the example here, the probability in this experiment would imply that it does kind of matter. We're now at 80 and keep going. We asked it to run 100 times. And it looks like it's not a very good strategy at all. In fact, it looks like less than I don't know, somewhere around 30%. It looks like not doing all that well. So it's still running, which is kind of surprising me. Oh, it stopped. Oh, that's right, because we'd done it 5 times to begin with. So this is an interesting thing. You might say, well, we were doing really well. Maybe we would have continued doing really well. You could try 1,000 times. If you wanted to do it quicker, you could say 1,000 times, but no animation. So let's have no animation here, and let's have it just go through 1,000 times much faster. And boy, howdy, we're already 2/3 there, 3/4 there, almost done with 1,000 times. And remember, the strategy means that this choice of strategy means that we're staying each time. So whatever our first choice was, we stick with it. And it looks like my goodness, 1/3 of the time, that strategy is not such a good idea. This may surprise you. And many things in statistics nowadays are done with computer simulations because they don't just surprise people who are brand new to probability and statistics. They surprise people who have been playing around with these ideas for a long time. Computer animations are a neat way to think about probability and statistics. You might say, well, what if we changed let's do this. Let's switch. Each time the game show host gives us an option, we'll switch. We don't need to animate it. Let's just see what happens here. And my goodness, it looks like we're doing much better. So in green is the switching strategy. In blue is the staying strategy. So each time we're given the choice, we do the exact same thing, and that is that we switch. So in green, you can see that we've won 65% of the time, and when we stayed, we only won 33% of the time. So an interesting example. Think about why this is true in general. So everything you're seeing in this example is true in general. We could run this another 1,000 times while I'm talking, and those numbers will get probably closer to being almost inverses of each other. In other words, the number of wins, or the probability of winning, the probability of losing, swapped for both of these ways of doing things. So you can see it's getting really close to being the inverse of the other. Okay, so let's go back to our Canvas course. There's a lot of cool things going on in statistics, and we can see that too. We're still in the class resources folder. At the bottom is a video archive. Kate Kozik's created some of her own videos. The reason there's a video archive is that when these close after the due date, you can go back to them for the midterm and the final. So that's the only reason they're here. That's why they're at the bottom of this folder. You probably won't need to use these videos except to study for the midterm and final. So I'm going to minimize that. Let's look at the course itself. So the things that are due this week are through the NOVA prediction by the numbers exam. So here's what we've got for the first week. And then notice that the standard routine of chapter and project starts after that. So the first thing is getting started with My Open Math. So it's connecting us now. This will happen automatically. It's asking us for a password. So I'm going to put in that password. You've got it in your email, so make sure that your email is configured. We're supposed to enter this number, so maybe not all that exciting, but just making sure that we can use the keypad. So I'm doing that. I'm going to submit that, and let's see. Let's go on to the next question. And it's saying we're supposed to enter some of these. Let's skip to this one. It looks a little bit more interesting. So the first thing I see is that there's a fraction. I can enter this with grouping symbols as you would in a calculator. Let me show you that first. So I'd enter the 1, and then I'd enter divide, which in our keyboard is a slash. And then I'd enter 2. And then to get to the exponent, I could certainly use MathQuill. But if I use, right above the 6 is the caret, the upward pointing arrow, and it looks like we want an exponent of 3. Now, if I type minus right now, I'm still in the exponent. And that's not where that subtraction symbol is supposed to be. So I'm going to delete that subtraction symbol. And then I'm going to arrow to the right. I'm going to use the cursor bank to arrow to the right, and I'm going to press subtract. And it stays in the denominator, and I enter that 3. So I'm going to submit this. I know we didn't enter the others, but let's take a look at the next question. Basically, this is, can we enter stuff? So here is an improper fraction. Here's a fraction. Here's a mixed numeral. We're asked to enter it. And we enter that simply if we wanted, for example, 5 1/3, we'd enter the 5 space 1/3. So here 2, then a space, and then 1/2. So I just used the slash on the keyboard. I could use the fraction key. Notice that I can post this to a forum, and if I do that, it will bring up a forum post, and I can enter my question here. So, why don't I need parentheses? If you had an algebra course these into a calculator, you'd need parentheses. So that might be a good question. My math quill is a little bit smarter than that. Then I could post this, and I can see that there it is. It's been posted, and so let's go back in here and submit that, and notice that there is a forum post. So if I go into an assignment, I can always see the forums by clicking on that forum link. So let me show you where that is again. In the upper right, that forum link. If you want extra credit, you can go into the forums and answer a question. So I might go in here and say, okay, I want to answer this, except it's, oh, I can answer my own question. And I'll see these. I don't participate too much in the forums. I want students to be able to help each other. I want students to get extra credit points, but I'll certainly check and make comments and provide extra credit in the background for that. So let's go back in. You can see the idea here. This is basically just asking us if we can enter stuff. So is there anything particularly, oh, this looks like lots of fun to enter. It looks like there's a radical. So if I click here, notice that a lot of choices come up. So this one I'm going to enter using Math Quill on our keyboard. So I see a 2 squared, so I'm going to get an exponent. I type 2 on the keypad, and then I'm going to go arrow to the right. I could just click in here. That would accomplish the same thing, plus 4. Then I want a square root. I'm going to click on that. X, I can use the one from my keyboard, or just clicking it from Math Quill, plus 1. I now need to get out of this. Oh my goodness. And I think I have a problem, because if I press slash, it won't put everything, the slash key won't put everything inside of that fraction. So I'm going to delete, and I'm going to put in those parentheses. So I just put in parentheses. You can click here, and then I'm going to press slash, and 5 minus x, again from the keyboard just as well. We're supposed to cube this, so let's raise it to the 3rd power. And if you say, well, that doesn't look identical, that's because of these parentheses. Let's get rid of those parentheses. We don't need them now. So we've got everything in the numerator. So we can submit that. And you see the idea. All this is how to enter answers into MyOpenMath. So let's go back and let's take a look at what comes after that. So there's a forum link for introducing yourself, a forum link for the attendance. That doesn't work at the moment. I'll be working on that. Then our first project video. So if you click on this, it will open that video for project 1. I encourage you to do that. And if you, I've got a lot of things open, and I think I just closed what I need, so I'm going to find that and reopen it. Okay, so let's take a look at that link to the Project 1 video. So that's due the first week of the semester. So that will accompany the workbook as you work through Project 1. When you're done with that, you can go to the only extra credit project, in fact, the only extra credit assignment other than answering student posts in the forum this semester. I'm going to enter the password. You've got that in your email, so make sure that you've been checking your email. And then these questions match what you saw in the workbook, with the exception of the last 2. These are algorithmically generated. In other words, they're a little bit different for every student. So that's our first look at the project. After that, you're going to see, and remember, you can see the next one. There's the next one. So let's go to the next, which is the documentary. So this is actually linking us to the ARC website. So let's scroll down to available from films on demand. So I'm going to click on that. It should open a new window, and it looks like it's opening that video here. So I encourage you to watch this 3 times, as I say in that welcome email. All sorts of good stuff. You can maximize the screen. Let's close that, and let's go to the next assignment. So after you've done that, there's a sample exam. So it looks like when I tried this as a student earlier, the time limit timed me out, which is fine. So let's reset that, so we'll see what you'll see when you try it for the first time. Okay, so let's go back in there. You know, we can now minimize both of these, and so that we go straight to the course itself. So if I wanted to go into the sample, I could. And so it's again asking me for that password. Remember, it's in your email. And it has a time limit. The timer can't be paused, and so it's asking me if I want to start. So this is just a sample. This isn't graded. The only reason to do this is to get a sense of what the exam itself will be like. So if we go to the next assignment, that is the exam itself. So this is telling me that there's going to be 5 questions in 10 minutes, 50 points possible. Remember, the weights matter more than the number of points. And when the due date is, of course I can do it any time before then, the time limit 10 minutes. So remember, as you're watching that, the second time you're taking notes, the third time you're making sure that those notes work for you. So that's the first week. So let's go back and let's see how the semester feels after that. So remember that for every chapter, so here's chapter 1, there's videos, a workbook quiz. For the first 2 chapters, there's also a makeup. Remember that if you use the makeup, you have to get in touch with me. The optional practice, if the workbook quiz doesn't, or if the attendance doesn't work for you, then of course you have to get in touch with me too. Optional means you do not have to do it. Students who get A's generally do it. And then there's the attendance, and then the chapter exam itself. If I try to click on the attendance now, I'm in the student side, it'll say that I have not yet met the prerequisite. I have to do the workbook quiz. So make sure you give yourself the time to do everything that you need. Namely, that you watch the video, take notes in the workbook, take the workbook quiz, and then have enough time for the attendance. There's a lot of questions in there. It won't let me in, but it should tell me what we're up against. So if I want to go into the instructor side, I can show you that there are lots of questions in each of these, and there's 220 points possible. So let's go in just to preview it. So here are some questions, and notice that there's quite a few, and expect that to take quite a while. This is the beginning of the semester, not that heavy. You can see that it's basically asking vocabulary questions. And then the only other thing that I want to point out in Canvas that's perhaps a little bit different, let's minimize those. I don't know why. Oh, we're on the instructor side. So those should pop up minimized. And let's look at the first project, the first graded project. So notice that there's a video that accompanies your workbook, and then there's the project itself. So, and remember, the projects don't have a time limit. So when I log in, assuming I've got the password, I can see what that project is. So it's because I can return to this question as many times as I want, and that's true for all the projects and the attendance assignments, until the due date. So it looks like it's due at January 26th at essentially midnight. So I think that's a good introduction to Canvas, not just the stuff that's due in my Open Math the first week, but the stuff that appears later on. So by Chapter 1 and Project 2, where we're getting into that routine of having a exam, chapter exam, or midterm or final on Tuesdays, and then a project due on Thursdays. Remember, don't just go straight in here. Remember that there's a video, and that video accompanies your workbook for not only the chapter exams, but also for the projects. So I'm going to remind you that there's also a video for that random tosses project, and that it is exactly working you through what we see in the workbook. So just like the chapter exams, there's online lessons for those as well. Okay, so let's wrap up this introduction to probability and statistics this semester. I hope you're excited. I hope you see that things are laid out and waiting for you. You can get started at any time. If you want to go a little faster, you can get in touch with me. I'm happy with that, especially if our spring recesses don't line up with your high schools. So just a last few things to kind of give you a sense of my philosophy of teaching. So I see my role as teaching with the carrot, that is with incentives and not the stick. So I am perfectly fine when the majority of my class gets A's and passes. I like that. That is the goal of my teaching. I am a guide, but you will do the work. That is an essential distinction. I will provide the framework for you to see that you can be successful and how satisfying it is to be successful. So you might say, well, is this course easy? And instead of thinking about it that way, think about how a class can be successful. And I think that what makes this class successful is I break the course into manageable pieces. So notice that each chapter has a workbook quiz, has an attendance assignment, has a chapter exam. Every week we're working through a chapter or a midterm or starting the final. And every week on Thursdays we've got a project. And those are very different, right? They have different expectations. So one is very much about skills when you're learning the vocabulary and how to do things for the chapter exams. And then the projects are very much about applications, what statistics' role in the world is. So here's something that's not in the syllabus, and I think this is very important. So I'm glad you're still paying attention. If you are zoning out, tune back in. So the final is a huge portion of the course. It's 20%. But if you have at least 70% on each chapter exam, not the average, but the floor, if you have at least 70% on each chapter exam, and that each is important, so nothing less than 70, and an average for the chapter exams of at least 80%. So a floor of 70, so nothing less than 70, and an average of 80, or of course better, then you can keep your grade at the end of the semester. That is, you do not have to take the final. Notice that your grade at the end of the semester is not just chapter exams, right? It comes from the projects and the midterms and the documentaries and your attendance assignments and any extra credit you got from posting answers in the forums. So that's the grade you keep, not necessarily the exam average. So these are two different clauses, right? The if part says that if you do these two things, if your chapter exams are at a floor of at least 70, that is, each chapter exam is at least 70%, and your average is at least 80%, then you do not need to take the final. I think that's an excellent incentive, and it basically shows that the way I conceive of this course is that you work consistently over the course of the semester. This is not a course where there are large amounts of credit available to make up for slacking off at other times in the semester. This is a course that requires you to work consistently, and this is a pretty darn good incentive. Students usually lose a grade on the final. So if they were getting an A, they usually get a B on the final. If they were getting a B, they usually get a C. So finals are hard, and I do know that. I know that they're essential for many students, but for some students, I think this will provide the incentive to work consistently, to nail things down early in the semester as you're working through, so that you do not need to take the final. The second one, no longer an issue. You can use whatever notes you want to use on the exams. The second, perhaps more philosophical than any of the others, just how to deal with stress. You know, if the idea of college is stressful, if the idea of statistics is stressful, there's a reason that it's stressful to you, because our society rightly says that education is valuable. You can take it with you. You can leave a job and still have your education. You can leave a situation that isn't working for you. So an education is valuable, but that also means that acquiring it can be stressful. So think of that stress as a reminder of why the course is important to you. An introduction to college, getting your foot into the door. Turn that stress into motivation. I think you'll find that that is a great way to think of it. If you find that you're stressed, oh my goodness, I've got this stats class, it's a college level stats class, there's all sorts of other stuff in it from the projects, including Bayesian statistics that address issues with social justice and things like that. It's a big course with a lot going on in it. Instead of thinking about that as stress, think that that stress is a reminder that the course is valuable to you, and make it into motivation. It's easy to fall into referring to things as whether they're easy or hard. And I think it's really useful to remind yourself that easy things are things you're familiar with and hard things are new things. And if your goal is to get an education, you're going to be encountering a lot of new things. And if your goal is to redo the same things you're already good at and stick with the familiar, then easy might and hard might not be the best way of thinking of those. Doing new things takes some guts, takes some motivation, but it's worth it. So translate those words. Math is neither easy nor hard. When you're familiar with it, it feels easy. When it's new to you, it might feel hard. Statistics is not required for a whole lot of majors at CSUS. That's not to say that this isn't an important class, but make sure it's the correct class for you. Here's a fantastic quote about the role of math for those of you who perhaps aren't in a math or science major. Artists and humanists embrace complexity and ambiguity. Mathematicians, in contrast, work by obsessively defining terms and stripping off extraneous meaning. The almost neurotic insistence that every term be rigorously defined and every statement proved ultimately frees one to imagine and talk about the unimaginable. Most people, traumatized by school experiences of mathematics, know all too well that mathematics is the most meticulous and demanding of disciplines, but few get to see that it's also the most liberating and imaginative of all human activities. Absolute precision buys the freedom to dream meaningfully. One of my absolute favorite quotes from one of my favorite books by Donald O'Shea. Keep that with you over the course of the semester. We do a lot that is rigorous, but we're trying to dream meaningfully, to think the best thoughts that our species is capable of. So here's a myth about math that some people are naturally gifted in mathematics. I'm not even sure what that means. The reality is that math takes work and work takes time. So if you've got the time and you're willing to put in the work, then you are already on your way to doing mathematics. I believe that math rewards people who have careful, slow, and methodical personalities. That's not to say that it's better. That's just to say that at some times in your life, it's valuable to slow down, be careful about how you're using terms, what they mean, be methodical. And I think a perfect way of thinking about that is the mindset that you need to be in when driving. Speed limits. Other drivers might be distracting you, but you're trying to be methodical, being careful and slow. That's perfectly fine. Ways to succeed. Get help right away. Math builds on itself. We've got the forums that we've seen in Canvas. Studying by rereading your notes, looking back at quizzes. That'll all be in the workbook, exams, explaining to yourself how you knew what to do in each step. There's tutoring, cut back on other things. Riding transit is a great way to make sure that you've got the money to go to school and focus on it. So after the pandemic, work here. If you come to AR, lots of jobs here. Lots of ways to socialize with college students. College students know what you mean when you say, okay, I have to go home, I have to study. Or if you want to go to the library and study, that's something that college students understand. So working with college students, socializing with college students, joining clubs with college students is a great way to be around people who understand how hard college is and how important college is, and will be there to kind of support you as you support them through your journey. It has every potential of being stressful to start a new thing. So attitude is essential. So FDR, of course, the President of the United States during the Second World War, famously and I think very correctly said, you have nothing to fear but fear itself. So getting over that fear and putting in the effort, doing what you need to do to be successful is very important. So let's talk about the climate change project and the fact that I think anyone in sociology and certainly in statistics would know that people do not always act in their best interests. Rick Barry, if you know anything about free throws, is one of the all-time best in that part of basketball. But he throws it in a funny way, and people belittle it by calling it a granny shot. But it works, and if people wanted to succeed in free throws, they would do what Rick Barry does. Similarly, if you follow or are interested in bowling, Jason Belmonte grew up as a kid of the owners of a bowling alley. And so as a little kid, he couldn't get his fingers in the hole. So instead, he used both hands. He continues to do that as an adult and continues to be very successful, but very few other people use his method of bowling. It doesn't look right to them. They believe that you should perhaps not act in your best interests. And these two are examples of people who kind of show us that even when there's a better way of doing something, these examples both from sports, but it's true for virtually everything, that even when someone illustrates that there is a better way to do something, people don't often do it. Okay, our last bit, we're almost done, is an opportunity for you to earn some points just by thinking strategically. So very much in the spirit of statistics, but actually from a part of mathematics called game theory. So this is optional. You do not have to do this. So if you choose to do this, simply send me an email or reply to any of my emails saying how much you choose to invest and how much you choose to save. So right now you've got 40 points. And I'm going to ask you to choose an amount to invest. And when you subtract that amount from 40, the remainder is the amount that you've saved. So if you say 10 points, then you've invested 10 points and you're potentially going to save 30 points. Now, what happens here is that I will then take the average, I'll add up the amount that is invested from all the students who choose to participate in this, and you certainly don't have to. And if that is more than the amount that is needed, and I'm not telling you how much that is, but it's certainly in the context of climate change. So think about something where the consequences are very dramatic and significant. So you get to choose an amount you want to invest, and the remainder is the amount that's saved. Now, you will get those points free and clear. You won't have to do anything else for them, assuming that the class average of the amount invested is at least the amount needed. Now, if it isn't, then no one gets anything, and all the points are lost. So you won't get any of these 40 points. So whatever you saved, you're not getting it if the amount invested isn't on average what it needs to be. So this is basically a strategy situation. Now you might think to yourself, well, you know, some people really want the points, so they might invest a lot. So some people might invest 30 points, hoping that they'll get free and clear without having to do anything else, 10 points. Some people might be greedy, invest 0 points, hoping that everyone else invests enough that they get to keep all 40. So you can see why this is a problem. You can see why this is something that is interesting to mathematicians and statisticians. Really, that last phrase, otherwise all the points are lost, is key to this, right? It really doesn't matter what you do as long as you invest enough. And I'd like you to explain your reasoning. So in this email to me, say you invest a certain amount, you save a certain amount, and your reasoning for that is whatever you're thinking. It's a nice way to get to know my students at the beginning of the semester. Very few semesters, I shall say this right now, do students get to keep the amount saved. In other words, the amount invested is rarely as much as it needs to be. And unfortunately, that's common not only in statisticians who do this in the United States, but this particular iteration of this project actually started in Germany, and the professor who gives this there has never once had the amount invested be high enough for the students to get anything. And see the true pity of this, right? You're not really losing anything by investing points. You could invest 35 points and get 5 points free, but psychology stands in the way. And psychology basically says, oh, I probably could get a little bit more than that. And math, statistics, game theory, all come together in studying how best to make things understandable to people. This situation is generally difficult for people to understand. They want to save, they want as many free points as possible, and often end up losing everything as a result. So think about this in the terms of climate change, kind of the issue that we're dealing with as a species at the moment, and explain what your reasoning is. Again, entirely optional, but if you do, you might even get some points. So I hope you enjoyed this. I hope it gave you a sense of what's going on this semester. You've got the syllabus to return to. You've got that first email. It's also got the password in it to get you into those assignments. So have a great semester. You'll be hearing from me throughout the semester. And remember, you've got videos for all the chapter exams and all the projects. So I think you're off to a great start. I hope you're excited about the semester and looking forward to learning more.